Go for it.
Hey, good morning, everyone. It's V, the Guerrilla Economist, coming to you live again, and we are actually doing another Rogue Money interview series, and we have a very special guest on today. You know, oftentimes you've heard me, talk about innovation. You hear me talk about, listen, about being empowered, being involved in change, how we need to transform how we do things, that it shouldn't be as politics as usual. It shouldn't be just, hey, this is what we do, so let's just keep doing it. We have just the guy here. And the thing with Don Wettrick, the background on this guy is amazing. I mean, this guy's spoken for Fortune 500 companies. He's the founder and CEO of StartEdUp. He's the author of Pure Genius: Building a Culture of Innovation. He's an international speaker and presenter. He's the innovation coordinator at Noblesville High School. Okay, and if you're lucky enough to go there, man, God bless you. But this is a guy who is really turning education and on its head, and just a truly remarkable individual. With that being said, Don, it's an honor to have you on, sir.
Thanks. I'm gonna have to play that introduction for my mom and dad. It's nice of you.
Hey, no problem. Believe me, it's the least I could do, man. I mean, Don, so give the audience a little bit of background of who you are and what you're all about, and what started your passion on this quest of empowerment, of really recognizing, hey, there's a problem in the way that our kids are learning, and what spurred you to do that which is different, man.
Yeah, I think really the origins were two things. My dad, he was an educator, and when I got out of college, I actually worked for a think tank in Indianapolis. Wow. I was the dumbest person there, believe me. But I decided to go into education, and my mom and dad had had paid for my college education. So I was going to tell them I was going to go back. I wasn't asking for money. But I let them know that, I was going to do that. And everybody in my family was an ed. And I thought he was going to say, don't do it or whatever. But, he never badmouthed education. But he did say, son, I don't care if you teach for the next 20 years. Just promise me you won't teach 1 year 20 times. And that always stuck with me because actually it didn't mean anything to me then. But as I started to teach, there were some teachers that were getting out their year out of the closet. Dittos you weren't allowed to write on because those dittos they didn't want to make copies of next year. And I started to see that there was kind of a problem that student engagement was low. That's not to say that I think that there's an entertainment factor. Sometimes it's not as entertaining, but the engagement was low. And then secondly, it was Dan Pink. Daniel Pink did a TED Talk about 7 years ago now, I think. And, it was on the puzzle of motivation. And they wanted to see what they found out. It wasn't just money. It was the pursuit of mastery and some freedom. So I watched that and I thought, okay, why can't school look like that? Or at least why can't one class look like that? So he talked about, at Atlassian at Google, they allowed 1 day a week for the employees to work on what they wanted to work on. And so I thought, let's do this. And so I talked to my then freshman English class and I said, how would you like a day of the week where you could work on the things that you wanted to work on? And here's the crazy thing. Everybody said, yeah, finally, school can be relevant. Finally, I can do what I want. And I said, okay, next Friday we start. Like, yeah. And next Friday came and nothing. And I quickly learned that people like their prison cell. They were allowed to pursue almost anything, and they sat there and like, what do you want me to work on? What will get me an A? What do you want to work on? I don't know. Stuff. And it took some time for them to get out of that mindset. So by all means, I mean, I now, like listening to people that, talk about failing forward and all this other stuff, but it's not just a mantra. It's true. So I decided, you know what, I want this to be my own class instead of just 1 day, like 30 minutes on a Friday. So I asked my principal. He said no. I heard yes, even though he said no. And I kept going on. And I was dumb enough to think that I could just call Dan Pink and say, could I get your help? And that's exactly what I did. And Dan helped out and Skyped the class a couple times, and they got it approved. And then we were off and running. And then my class is called Innovation in Open Source Learning. And the best way to describe it is the things that you're obsessed with, the things that you want to know more about and push past. Why can't why can't you do that in school for one period a day? And the open source part of it is that you're not going to learn from me. I'm going to be a project manager. I'm going to push, I'm going to prod. But if you're saying like, hey, I really want to code an app for just Android, great.
Yeah.
I don't know how to do that. But I sure as heck know how to break things down, how to set goals, how to do, reflect and adjust. And so that's how it was born. That was a really long answer. I'm so sorry.
No, it's a great answer, and I'm glad that you shared that with us, man. What is it about learning today that's really just not? I mean, look, I remember being younger and being one of those kids who was absolutely bored to tears in school. Absolutely bored to tears. Like I'd ace all my tests, but I wouldn't study. I wouldn't, take the time to be enthused in subjects that I'm just not interested in. So what the heck is wrong with kids today, especially like, with education? I mean, a lot of kids I speak to, man, my younger nephews and nieces and cousins, they're like, yeah, man, I hate school. It's boring. It's just the same old repetition, same old rote, man. So,
Right.
where did this come from? Like, how did school get to where it is today, man?
Well, so first of all, it's the exact opposite. School
Mm,
is still the same.
right. Right. Okay.
The difference is that you don't need to go to school to learn anymore at all.
Right.
You can YouTube 90% of things that you need to know.
Hmm.
There are online classes. There is YouTube. There are wikis. So the difference now is I think we have a customer base that's a lot more savvy.
Yeah.
So when we offer something, you're saying the learning. Well, learning sometimes is also self-directed. So for years, we have based performance on compliance.
Hmm.
You know exactly what the answer is.
Right.
And and by the way, that's also based on somebody's opinion.
Hmm.
You might have and I'm not bashing social studies teachers, but sometimes diversity of thought was not allowed. So you have a student that will write an essay with a conservative slant, and he's told, no, that's wrong, because my viewpoint is this is right. So when we have students that want to learn, they sometimes want to learn. They don't
Yeah.
necessarily want to react. And I think that's the fundamental difference of people that are wanting to pursue the innovation route. If you know the answer ahead of time, it's not innovative. If you're offering a lesson and you know that the answer is going to be 7.2, okay, that's kind of all right. But innovative is how many different formulas can you come up with that will equal 7.2?
Yeah.
How can no one cares with what you know? They care about what you can do with what you know.
Hmm.
I brought this up not too long ago, and I've got to find it. Maybe I can look it up on YouTube. I think it was like 1984. Brooke Shields went to, and it may have been like the American Music Awards. And at the time, she was in Harvard, and everybody's so happy that she was in Harvard. And I don't think that I'm dreaming this, but they had her get up there and like, hey, you're going to Harvard. And like, what did you learn? And she said, E equals MC squared. And everybody applauded. And in 1984, saying that you knew something counted. Could you imagine somebody saying, what have you learned? I've learned that E equals MC squared. You'd probably say, what does that mean? What can you do with that? What are the implications of that? That is the big fundamental thing. Here's my problem. We have, for years now, had students think that if you just sit down, shut up, and tell me what I want to hear, there's a future. That future is gone.
Yeah.
It's gone. Memorizing unless you're Ken Jennings, unless you're making a career on Jeopardy, there is very little future now. Thank you for laughing at that. There is very little future now for sit down, shut up, and memorize this.
Right.
The things that are out there are for people that can pattern recognition, right?
Sure.
I've noticed that people to do this and do that, so therefore I'm going to. You guys are money guys that can pick up on trends faster than anybody, make money.
Right. Right.
I want my students, and I'm not going to go political, but I don't want my students waiting around for a government official to tell them where their opportunities are.
Bingo.
Opportunities are everywhere. And this is the fundamental thing that I love about my class. When other people are running for the exits because there's a problem, they're running to the problem. Because my students know that opportunities are everywhere, and the world's richest people solve small problems. That's it. So
Right.
when our students can say, when everybody else is complaining, oh, this sucks, I wish somebody ought to do something about that. Somebody ought to is you.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody that comes up with a solution is, and I don't want them to focus on just money, but there's a financial reward for the people that can pick up on those patterns, find those problems, and then provide solutions.
Absolutely, man. I agree wholeheartedly. Do you think that, one of the biggest problems that's really killing the American educational system today is it conformity? And a lot of people bring that up. Do you see that as well? Is it a conformity that
Oh
that
God,
you, you
yeah.
know? Yeah.
Here's the catch-22. If you have no standard of measurement, you don't know what to base it off of.
Yeah.
But what gets measured, that's the hard part. And what breaks my heart is the lowest performing schools pride themselves on conformity, on
Mm.
compliance.
Wow.
You go to an inner city school, and the
Yeah.
first thing that they'll be proud of is the lack of expulsions they have. And I understand why. At a baseline level, you have to feel safe first. You know, all the
Sure.
periods of history, innovation came in times of peace. That's period. Well, actually, in wartime, I'm not going to go down that avenue, but when you feel safe, you have time to think deeply. So I get it. Lower performing schools need safety first. Understood.
Mhm.
But when you beat that into them and all they're really caring is, are you sitting down? Are you shutting up? Are you passing this test? They don't see the value in it.
Right.
And so you have to look at this as an entire system where for years it worked. So, and I'm so, not that I'm name dropping, but I'm so happy he's a friend of mine. Naveen Jain is an incredibly successful entrepreneur.
Okay.
Um, Interesting guy. And he and I were talking, and actually he's said this several times. He actually, I think he had a TED talk on it. He said there's a difference between broken and obsolete.
Mm.
He says, our education in a lot of ways is obsolete. And he says, if your grandpa got out his flip phone and started pointing his camera, I'm sorry, he started pointing the phone at him and says, why aren't the Instagrams working? You'd say, he's like, my phone must be broken. And you'd say, no, grandpa, your phone's not broken. What it was designed to do is to make phone calls, and it works. But what you want to do is something different, and it's obsolete.
Yes.
What our schools were designed to do absolutely worked
Yeah.
up till, I would argue, maybe the early 90s. And they're still doubling down on a lot of that. What they're designed to do, it used to work. Now, not as much. Punch in and punch out at your at your factory, done. That was really good. Make good boys and good girls that would follow rules, done. Now all of a sudden, who are our heroes now? The Mavericks, the true rule breakers. Although ironically enough, I just don't want my kids to be assholes. I don't like and maybe make some of your listeners mad. I don't like the hero worship of Steve Jobs. He was not a nice person.
Right. Okay.
I think you can be a freaking great innovator, but be a nice person. And again, that's something I really enjoy about Naveen. The guy just gives and gives and gives, and he wants to solve problems that affects billions of people, and be humble about it. So I want my kids to find solutions. I want them to be successful, but I don't want them to be assholes.
Very well said. I mean, I'm sure a lot of Apple fanboys are going to be a little butthurt about that statement, but
Oh, fine, let him be. He was a jerk.
yeah,
I mean, seriously, was he
yeah,
smart? Absolutely, but was he
yeah,
mean to
brilliant.
people? I don't like that. Be nice.
Absolutely, man. So, we're looking at the obsolete school system, and it's absolutely obsolete, man. One of the problems that's always identified is that one size fits all mentality, and clearly you've discovered that one size clearly does not fit all.
Yeah. What do you do?
Yeah.
I think that right now everybody needs to have at minimum a conversation. This is the hard part. Again, if you are now, like, say that you're a teacher at an inner city elementary, and you're saying, but you don't understand what I go through. Respect, understood. Those those things have to be addressed. But I think a lot of this is the culture and environment. I can't tell you how many times now it's the cool thing to talk about and reference Carol Dweck's growth mindset, growth mindset. We have a responsibility in education to create a culture to foster growth mindset. Case in point, if you brought a child to Disney World, their mind will explode with possibilities.
Sure.
Juxtapose that with if you go and actually I got to say my home state has done a much better job of cleaning up this mess. But if you stand in line at the Bureau of Motor Vehicles, growth mindset is not going to be on your mind. You're just like, God, when am I going to get out of here?
Yeah.
There is no hope for you. So while growth mindset is about overcoming obstacles, I get it. But to a 5-year-old that just wants to learn things, one part of their day can be growth mindset oriented. It's what you want to do, man. How can I help you learn how to build a better Minecraft castle? Because that will then make their mind explode. If you get into a school like, just shut up, the kid that may have growth mindset is going to just give up. And that's what hurts me more. That is truly the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer. Schools that are doubling down, tripling down on compliance, it makes you not want to be there. And who the heck wants to report to a place where you're always told, sit down and shut up? Now, I can just hear people say, well, you don't know what it's like in my school. It's violent, it's dangerous, all this other stuff. So start at the elementaries.
Yeah.
Let them know that school is a fun place. Let them know that school, it is so fun to learn. And especially if you're given time, like, look, if you know, there's some things that you do have to get through that are fundamental and some classes that you have to get through, but your reward is we have like this learning recess time, right? You have your own 20% time. That's what I'm working. That's actually what StartEdUp's all about. I want to have the foundations of this at every elementary school. It will then bubble up and then it'll seem natural at middle school. And then you'll have to, the kids that, because I don't think that you have to have this at every high school for every student. This should be an elective. There are some students that just simply like to memorize stuff, and that's cool. That's great. But there's also a lot of kids that don't like to, and that this class should be available to as an elective in every high school. And that's one of the reasons why I wrote my book, and that's one of the reasons why at StartEdUp, basically we do a lot of teacher training. We consult with schools on how to provide this kind of class, how to work your way from kindergarten through 12th grade.
Tell us a little bit about your book, man. I think it's very key that people understand it.
The book is a confession of someone that didn't know what he was doing and starting to figure things out. When I first wrote it, we were doing okay. And it's funny because actually I'm about ready to, I'm almost in the process of writing a second. I'm like, okay, here's us. Here's some of the things that I've seen. And here's why the alarm bell should be ringing. There's a reason why we started off and we were terrible, because we were not open to this growth mindset thing, right? And so the book was, here's some patterns I've seen, because really innovation is about pattern recognition. Here's some patterns I've seen. Here's the reason why. Here's the things you should avoid. And there's even 2 chapters on being social media savvy. I hate it when people say, well, it's not what you know, it's who you know. Well, then let's freaking know more people.
Yeah.
It's that if things were that simple, well, then do it. You guys got connected on me, from CJ, because, one, he's known me, but also through social media. I mean, okay, now is where I name drop, and I'm sorry. But like, I take to Twitter and LinkedIn. So if a student's like, hey, Mr. Wettrick, I really want to collaborate with this guy, or at least have a conversation with him, we reach out to them.
Right.
And we get more yeses than we get nos. Like, and here's the name drop. We had an hour-and-a-half conversation 3 weeks ago with Tim Ferriss. A couple of my kids were like, hey, we really want to talk to Tim Ferriss. All right, fine. It took a while.
Right.
Naveen, Dan Pink. I mean, we reach out to people because if knowing people is important, then let's do that. Instead of just saying, well, it's unfair. The world's unfair. Oh, stop it.
Exactly.
Stop it. Do something about it instead of complaining. But very few people actually, well, there's the joke we had in this class. We said that this class is the difference between December 31st and January 15th. It is fun on December 31st to say that what you're going to do in the next year. That resolution is fun. I'm going to lose weight. I'm going to make more money. I'm gonna. And by the December or January 15th, you're like, oh, to heck with
it. Yeah, most people's resolutions have hit that wall, man. That reality sunk in.
So, I mean, my job in that case is to be your resolution buddy. I'm there prodding you, making sure you go along. We have our own process. We have a methodology in which to kind of tackle these things. But, it's we're constantly reaching out. We're constantly doing things. And so, yeah, that's basically what the book's about.
That's awesome. And speaking of the book, guys, I mean, just to let everybody know, the audience know, I just purchased the book on Amazon, and I also the physical book, and I also got the Kindle copy as well. So I see Don's work as being very, very vital. Don, one of the things about school, okay, what is it about, like, we talk about like the waste of time that it is, and it's old, it's obsolete. What are some of the things that you are doing that's completely revolutionary, that's turned education on its head, man? Talk to us about that 20% principle, man.
So I would say that one of the things that I really, really, really love, my gosh, this is like picking your favorite song or your favorite child. There's so many projects going on right now. To not play favorites, I'll give an example of somebody who graduated last year. How about that? So one of our students watches 60 Minutes, and she sees a thing on the Fresh Bucks program of Detroit, and basically people are on food stamps, or they're now called SNAP benefits. To somebody, they said, let's to make sure they eat healthy, let's get them to match their food stamps at the local farmers market. And she thought, why not here? And so she goes to the SNAP benefits coordinator, and then she goes to the local farmers market, the people that run it. She's like, here's what I want to do. And they went, great. How do you do that? And she figured it out. She used school time and school resources. We have a great laser cutter. She got a small grant of balsa wood. She lay out and designed her own coins, so you couldn't replicate it. And she basically was distributing it to people that were on SNAP benefits to A, spur the local economy at the farmer's market, and B, get people that traditionally don't eat as healthy to buy fresh, locally produced food, right? That's just one thing. I mean, we've had some kids that have developed apps. Here's a funny story. Here's one thing I like. We had a student last year who was contemplating not going to college because he wanted to be an entrepreneur. And he thought, instead of paying a lot of money to learn how to be an entrepreneur, what if I just learned on my own? So he gets through the class. He ends up finding his mentor. I shouldn't say which one. I'll just say this. His mentor started a Fortune 200 at minimum company, a tech company. I don't know if he wants me to talk about it because he doesn't. Yeah. And so that's his job. So he starts working for him. Then he goes on an event at the Venture Club that we spoke at. And I was the keynote, and I said, hey, don't believe me. Here's two of my students. He left with $25,000 in seed funding.
Wow.
Then he got it matched. So his job, I think, pays him right around, I don't know, $30,000.
Yeah.
And he's gotten $50,000 of seed funding. So let's see, that's 50, 60 cents, 80,000.
Right.
And he was going to spend at least 20,000 at a university this year learning how to be an entrepreneur. He's up plus 100,000 this year.
Absolutely, with no debt and real on-the-job training, real skills.
Yep.
Wow.
And just to be snarky, he goes to other universities and goes and hangs out on the weekends with his friends and and I'm like, good for you, man. You were freaking hacking it. You were hacking the system.
Wow.
And I love it. And and if he wants to, he can take there's a lot of courses online that are free. I mean, Stanford does some pretty cool things. I mean, there's stuff out there. So actually, we were talking, Tom Bilyeu, who has co-founded Quest Nutrition. He talked to the kids and he says, you know what?
Nice.
My degree,
it's good stuff.
They are. He said his degree was in filmmaking. He says, you know what? No one's ever asked to see my diploma.
Yeah.
I make nutrition drinks and I make nutrition bars, and no one has checked out my credentials. No one cares.
Nobody cares, man.
Right. And so, no, I love that. I mean, I literally, I'm trying to not give examples of this year because then somebody's gonna, because my students will listen to this and they're like,
Yeah.
"Well, you should have mentioned mine." So I'm deliberately not. But yeah, we've built apps, we have started programs, we've started done things that are social entrepreneurial, we've done tons and tons and tons of
I
stuff.
love it.
And sometimes they're not. And I'm giving you some of the grandiose. I mean, we've had some things like what was something simple? Okay, a kid on the basketball team.
Hmm.
And he had a hard time with this because tell me what to do, coach, and I'll do it.
Yeah.
Right. Sometimes athletes have a hard time with this class. And so he was struggling one day. He says, I don't know what I want to work on. I said, well, I said a lot of times it's problem identification. And what are you passionate about? Basketball. What do you love? Basketball. Okay, fine. Have you seen a problem? Well, yeah. Like sometimes the coach, and this is what he says, like sometimes the coach won't call a timeout and he wants us to like learn on our own. But sometimes like we just keep falling further and further down a spiral. I'm like, okay, what would you do about it? He's like, well, if we can't call a timeout, like maybe there's some way of I don't know, like in-game communication that we can kind of right our own ship.
Hmm.
Okay, what are you gonna do about it? Well, maybe I can like call a team players meeting only and we can like work on our own like secret communication or hand signals or something. I'm like, great. No, he wasn't coding an app. He wasn't getting, people on food stamps, but that was important to him.
Yeah.
And I dig that because he used this class time to make an innovation that hasn't been done for him. And so yeah, so some people like there's a misnomer this class is you have to code an app or you have to start a tech company. You don't. If you want to help your basketball team or you want to work with a local humane society, that's awesome too.
Yeah. Yeah. What you guys are doing is really remarkable. It's like the decentralization of education, which it should be. And you look at all over the world, and we're from the whole economic, geopolitical, geostrategic end of things, and we've been chronicling this whole push against centralized systems, and we're seeing it. We're seeing it. We've seen it in the eurozone where we had the Brexit, we have the soon-to-be Ital exit, and what's going on with the Greek crisis over there and soon to be Germany and France as well, because people are sick of these bloated bureaucracies, these monoliths that are sitting on a high hill somewhere else, far removed from the average person, and dictating to what the average individual and their families and how they should be living. And we're seeing the pushback in there, and we saw the pushback, and I think irrespective of anybody's political views, the election of 2016 shows an absolute rebellion against establishment systems, man, and you cannot deny that. And I'm seeing it in banking because we're from a whole money aspect of it. I mean, the disruptions that have occurred with fiat currencies, the move towards Bitcoin, the move towards decentralization, the internet's being decentralized. You know, uh, Everything is moving towards a decentralized world, and that's really spurring creativity. It's really spurring so much innovation. And Don, like what you're doing with education, man, it is definitely, you guys are on the forefront. I mean, our kids have to survive. They have to compete in a new, modern, fast-paced world where, like you said, the best example, it's like you have a flip phone, but your flip phone, you can't upload your Instagram pics on it. So absolutely, bro. I mean, it's incredible to see this. I'm excited to see this decentralization.
No, so am I. And it's funny because earlier I was alluding to diversity of thought is dead.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping to see that change because somebody knowing what's best for everybody is laughable. Laughable. And I don't want to get into a bunch of hot water, but I'll say this: education needs that reawakening, and I think it's coming in the form of a crappy economy.
Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of people, and invention is what is it? The
Necessity is the mother of invention.
yes, invention. Thank you. And all of a sudden, people are like, why aren't these things being filled? Well, because we've done a bad job in the last 10 years preparing them for these things. I think that decentralization, I'm hoping you will see. But that's also when you're going to start seeing more and more school choice things pop up.
Yeah.
Like, look, I'm a public educator. I love public education if it can adapt.
Yes.
I don't hate on charter schools for the sake of trying. Now, I do hate on charter schools that try to make a fast buck and leave. There's ripe with corruption, but there's ripe with corruption in public schools too. So I think that the more transparent we can be, the more showcasing we can do of what's right, owning up with what's wrong. And partly in my book, you'll read it. I'm like, here's where I screwed up. Here, here's the things I'll never. There's a couple of things I didn't want to put in the book, but I did.
Yeah.
That the more transparent we can be, I think that's going to be good. But the all powerful, especially media, what they choose not to cover is what's usually held this back, and that is why, and I've alluded to it before, as why I love social media. You check me out on Twitter, and you know what I'm doing. I'm public about it. Shameless plug. I started a podcast 2 weeks ago. It's not about education, but it is. Basically, it's the StartEdUp podcast where we interview great innovators, CEOs, authors, founders, things like that, because their lessons of failing and overcoming are so central to education, but it's just not an educationalese. So the more we can use YouTube, social media to kind of showcase what is great, then we don't necessarily have to rely on the media outlets.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, with just not this election, but other elections throughout the especially the Western world, it's populism. And the way that the mainstream entrenched establishment medias and these systems that were created by these big bloated bureaucracies and the top 0.001% to consolidate their power, so to speak, you see the absolute revolt by people using social media. And social media was one of the clear winners of 2016. It showed the people how powerful it is. And we ignore social media at its peril. The funniest thing is, Don, is when I talk to like older people that are, older educators, and they still look at social media like it's some sort of archaic thing. They still look at the internet like it's just for emails or the information superhighway. They haven't adapted to the fact, and people need to realize this: the internet is just not a utility anymore. The internet itself is life at this point, man.
Yeah,
it's life.
Yeah, it is. And of course, there's pendulum swings that are good and bad on that.
Right.
I've seen some dangerous things come across, but the most dangerous things is when media outlets ignore. The worst form of media bias is ignoring. So some of these things that are starting to creep up and trend, I'm hoping it gets some love from main sources. And I will say this: when you're doing what's right for kids and you can showcase what you're doing, I think you're bulletproof.
Yeah.
I've taken some risks early, things that were borderline fireable.
Yeah.
Because I kept asking for forgiveness instead of permission, because everything would turn out fine. But I think that because because we were so transparent and you saw everything I was doing, that I think that the media then would say, okay, there's no one, because everything has to be so freaking political.
Right. Exactly.
Everything has to be so political, and it's kind of funny because I really started to do a lot of things in Texas. Because my class kind of flies in the face of Common Core, which is a federal program. And if you're doing something anti-federal program, you're a Texan. and I love it there. I'm not bad-mouthing. I think it's wonderful.
Sure.
But it's just so funny because they're like, because they labeled me like, well, you must be, a really hardcore Republican doing something like this. And, for complete transparency, I'm like, well, I'm a libertarian, so kind of. And like everything has to be so political, and I think that government should really politics should stay out of education. We're doing what's right for kids. I don't want to do what's right for unions. I don't want to do right for special interest groups. I don't want to do right for, and that's why sometimes I said on the charter school, sometimes it has a dirty, ugly side. I just want to prepare students for the future, and that future is vastly changing, and we have to.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I can't look at myself in the mirror and say I'm preparing them.
Right. Exactly, man. Totally. The problem again with modern education, like you got all these kids that are, you've taken kids out of the environment where they're sitting down, they're memorizing stuff, they're regurgitating information that's taught to them, and they're archaically being graded by this thing, and that's how it was for so long. Uh, what do you feel about Common Core, and how has things become worse because of it? And what do you think? Will there be a pushback? How are basically you're a teacher?
See, that's just I mean, so this is always the catch-22.
Yeah.
I want schools in a lot of ways to police themselves.
Sure.
Because they'll know but okay, so when there's no standard, then there's no standard. And at the same time, you have to allow for some differences. Now, I've seen some teachers that are like, I'm just going to shut my door and do it the way I've always done it. And in a lot of cases, they're still teaching to the test. So in some ways, they're rewarded because they're teaching to the test. Common Core and a lot of these things are bad with an asterisk. I think that I'm not throwing all the baby out with the bathwater. I like that there's foundational learning. You should be able to be at this level for math, and you should be able to read this many, this grade level, and you should be able to comprehend this much. I'm cool with that, because if there's really crappy schools, they're outed, right? But that being said, it should be, you're setting the minimums, right? Like get that stuff out of the way and say, okay, you guys are at the minimum. Now, could you show me some growth? Could you show me some innovation? What is being done that hasn't been done before? Is there an information exchange with other teachers? Are you guys working with or working at the students? Those kind of things can open up after you've proven that you've hit the minimums. But when you, and this is where I start sounding a little bit more pro-union, when you badger teachers and say your pay is tied to performance, if they're not doing X, Y, and Z, then there's no time to innovate. There's no time, because you have to take care of these baseline needs. And so that's why at times it's really a thankless job to be a teacher. And people listening like, well, then what are you saying? Are you saying that Common Core is good? They're parts of it.
Right.
Are you saying it's bad? Parts of it. That is why I'm a really big fan of the states kind of doing it by a case-by-case basis. But yeah, this is the problem. When you try to make everything uniform for everybody, you're going to get a cookie cutter vanilla. I would just like a model of saying, okay, you have met the minimum requirements. Now go and do great things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Don, we're about coming to the end of the interview, man. Why don't you plug your contact information again? Your books, how people could reach you, how people could follow you on social media.
Sure. I'm pretty active on Twitter. I'm at Don Wettrick. That's DonWettrick. You can always email me. Let's see. The shortest one is just dwettrick@gmail.com. It won't give you the business one. It's longer. Books on Amazon. StartEdUpinnovation.com is some of the programs we offer. And yeah, if you are, if you want to mentor some students, I'm always looking for people that have unique insights and expertise, because a lot of educators want to bring people into the building. They just don't know how to get in. So email me and I'll hopefully point you in the right direction.
And before that, man, could you also quickly describe some of the work that you're doing in schools and educators that brings innovation to the classrooms real quick?
Right. Well, I mean, it's funny. I'm a high school teacher, but I work a lot with elementaries right now.
Nice.
Sorry. Well, I mean, obviously, like even within my own township at Noblesville, I teach every other day. So I will go to the elementaries and work there and kind of work with them. But with StartEdUp on my spare time, and I almost say that laughingly, working with elementary teachers on here's how you provide this framework, with middle schools on how you can share this with the teaming approach. What is innovation? How do you rethink? Some of our classes, I don't have to go on location. I've got a teacher training course on what it is to think like an innovator, and then some training for high schools on if they would want to offer this kind of course as an elective. So I hate to use the word consulting. We kind of coach other schools.
Yeah. Awesome. Fantastic, folks. Once again, that's Don Wettrick. Again, great guy. Get the book, Pure Genius: Building a Culture of Innovation. Get it. I got it. I got the hard copy. Just downloaded the Kindle. Um, Don, we got to do this again, man. I mean, absolutely. Just
You
awesome
want to have
stuff.
your mind blown. You should. I've got two students you should talk to, and I
Let's do
didn't.
it.
And I will not play favorites, but when you hear what they're doing, you will want to hear from them. I'm promising you.
CJ, did you hear that?
I heard that. We'll get it lined
CJ,
up.
we got to get that lined up. Maybe next week. Don, you want to do it next week?
We will do that.
Sure. Sure.
Let's do it,
Yeah,
bro. Let's hear from this because this is the future. This is the kind of solution I want people to hear. I mean, there are people that listen to like some media outlets, or they're listening to alt news or whatever, and they're looking at all the world and they're just sitting in fear. They just want to go into the basement, eat cat food, and wait for the SWAT team to come through the door, as I always say. But there's so much opportunities, man, and this is the future. And I think it's key. I think people need to hear it, man. Absolutely, Don. Let's do it, bro.
That's not a problem.
Fantastic. And once again, guys, this is V the Guerrilla Economist. Again, we're on roguemoney.net. Check us follow us on Twitter on Rogue Money. I'm sorry, at the Rogue Money. And again, the podcast, that's where most of the action is. Listen to the podcast, download it, check it out on iTunes as well as on Android. And check out the Rogue Money Facebook page. And with that being said, thank you all for listening in. This is V and CJ with our special guest, Don Wettrick. Thank you so much all for listening in. Have a good one. Take it away, CJ.